Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and if you're in the here and now, thank you as well for joining us. I appreciate your taking time from your valuable schedule to join us. My name is Grant Cameron, and I'm running the Winnipeg UFO Group. I'm not sure even what it's called anymore. It used to be called the UFO Experiencers Group, and it's been running for a number of years. Has a pretty big, large list of people that have signed up and been part of this thing. And every month, the second Tuesday of every month, we run an interview with somebody. And I did last month, and I'm doing this month again. My friend Mark is busy doing something else, and he's kept the group together. And tonight, I'm welcoming a friend of mine who I've interviewed a number of times, and I think the people in Winnipeg from the Winnipeg group should know, and they should know what he's doing. He's a very important researcher, and his name is Preston Dennett, and he's from California, the sunny uh, shores of California. And he's written, when he comes on, you'll see the books behind him. That's how many books he's written, like 1,000 books or whatever he's written. I've written a few books, but he's written way more than I have. And we're going to talk to Preston tonight about some of the very bizarre books that he's written in terms of looking at UFOs over schools, UFOs over drive-in movie theaters. And then we're going to get into something I talked to Preston. I said I wanted to talk to him about, and that's out-of-body experience. Preston is an expert in out-of-body experience stuff. He knows how to do it, and he regularly does this kind of stuff. And so we're going to get into that and the importance of what that means for the UFO world and for the world of consciousness, or however you look at this thing. And so welcome, Preston Dennett. I really appreciate you being on, because I think you are one of the more interesting people on the planet in terms of knowing stories. And that's what people basically want to hear. They want to hear some stories. They want to hear what's going on, and you've got a lot of stories. So welcome to the Winnipeg UFO Experiencers Group.
Thanks, Grant. It's a pleasure and an honor. I'm excited. I love
Yeah,
talking about OBEs and UFOs even more. So,
there you go. Well, let's maybe give a little bit of background. How many books have you written? All those your books in the background there, or how many have you written? You've written quite a few.
those are the ones I've read at least 3 times.
Is that right?
Oh yeah,
Seriously? Because
oh yeah.
usually, it's like UFO people, they have a collection of 250 books, but they haven't read any of them. They just sort of buy everybody's book and put it on a shelf. I remember there's a little girl in Florida. I don't know if you know that story. She had 9 years old. She wrote a UFO book, and she was lecturing for Paula Harris, and she had her
Oh
book there.
wow.
She was selling her book. So I went on stage and I had my book, and I said, "Come on up here." And I said, "Here's your book. You're going to be like every other UFO person. Put it on your shelf. It'll be your first of 250 books you've never read." So I don't know if she ever read my book or whatever.
Wow. No, I love rereading books. You get more out of
Wow.
them each time.
So you must have a pretty good memory, because you combine all these stories, and you have these really bizarre, like for example, let's start with schools. So everybody knows the Ariel school story about
Yep.
the 62 school kids, and the UFOs land and the aliens are there, and John Mack goes and interviews them. And then I remember I was actually pushing a girl that was helping me put books together at the time, and I said, there's other ones. I'll give you the cases. We should write these things up. And then you beat us all to it. So talk a little bit about these cases that you got over schools, that people don't realize that there are a lot of stories of UFOs over schools.
Well, I got a few of myself over the years. 32 books, by the way, and counting. Um,
There you go.
but
So
yeah,
you're a
I've heard.
millionaire 32 times, right?
Yeah, exactly. I heard about the Ariel Elementary School. That's kind of what got me questioning things, because I instantly remembered, of course, the Melbourne Westall High School case in 1966, April 1966, and started thinking of some others, like Crestview Elementary School, 1 year later to the day, by the way, from Melbourne Westall High School case. In the Crestview case, they landed again right by the school. This is in Opelika, Florida. And another famous case, which is technically a school, is Hillsdale College. And that turned out to be a really important case when I looked into it, because Jim and Coral Lorenzen hopped on that case and said, you know what? We've had a bunch of cases at schools. We think there's going to be more of them. And it would be 2 weeks later that Westall High School case happened. Raymond Fowler also remarked on that particular case, the Hillsdale College. and said, you know, I have 15 unexplained cases up to this point. This was in March. And he says 8 of them occurred over schools. And I thought of course, the Broadhaven School in Wales in 1977. Again, UFOs landed, little ETs came out. Turns out some of the teachers and faculty saw it as well. Which turned out to be true for the Ariel Elementary case, though we didn't know it at the time. That's recently come out. And I think those were the main ones I knew about, but started digging deep into, you know, the UFO news clipping service, all the books you see behind you, APRO, MUFON, QFOs, all the databases, all the magazines I have in a room you can't even see.
Wow.
And I hit pay dirt. I mean, I actually cried when I found out that it wasn't just 10 or 20 or even
Yeah.
50. I found over 100. I'm gonna have to do a new book because I found about 100 more.
Is
I'm
that
not
right?
kidding. Oh yeah. And here's what's, you know, in a nutshell, really interesting about them is there's really nothing out there like this in the literature in terms of these are pretty much daylight always, very low level,
Who's that?
pretty long lasting. In 1/3 of the cases, these are landings or
Yeah.
humanoids are being seen. So that's a lot. And another interesting detail was that half of these cases occur at elementary schools, you know, our youngest kids,
Yeah.
primary age.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, an average witness count of about 40 people to about 200. Some outliers, you know, sometimes it's 10 or 5 or 10 students,
Mhm.
but generally it's, you know, 40, 50, 100, but up to, you know, 400 in a case in New Zealand at Maranui Primary School, Richmond, I think it was actually called, but at Maranui, New Zealand.
Wow.
And teachers are there too, just so you know. Teachers are there in over 50% of the cases verifying this. So it's
Wow.
not just kids, you know, telling stories.
Any photographs? Anybody get any photographs that are of any significance?
Yep, they sure did. There's a couple of cases. Sacred Heart Elementary School. There was a police officer whose job it was to just basically watch the kids. UFO shows up. He had his cruiser and a camera in it, ran back, got it. And you can look this up online. By today's standards, it's not super impressive, but it does show a kind of lighted object moving across the sky. And yeah, Sacred Heart Elementary School, but it had come down real low and was the size of a school bus when they first
Wow.
saw it. The nuns were freaking out. There's another case at gosh, what's the name? It's a school in North Carolina, I think,
Okay.
where this UFO kept showing up, and one of the students said, "You know what? I'm bringing my camera," and he captured. You know, he took a long frame. What do you call it when they leave
Oh,
the frame open?
wide frame. Yeah.
And he caught this UFO moving across the sky, and then it stopped, disappeared, moved forward, came back. And they do this sort of thing. They'll put on what we call a display in the in UFO vernacular. They're showing themselves off intentionally. So yeah, definitely there's photographic evidence, landing traces in a couple involving physiological effects where kids felt dizziness or electricity or something along those lines. But I think my favorite type of evidence is in a couple of them, there was angel hair. Now, for those of you who don't know what angel hair, that's a cotton candy kind of spider web-like substance that's sometimes emitted, apparently as a result of the plasma field surrounding these craft, though that's not fully determined. I think that's what's going on. And it's been pulled into its scientific labs and tested and contains, you know, silicon and boron and other substances that shouldn't be lying on the ground.
Yeah.
But at Marysville School in Ohio in 1967, his UFO showed up. The kids were watching it. Finally, like, you know, we better get an adult. So they called out the principal, and he saw it too, just in time to watch it dash away. And it let down volumes, huge volumes of angel hair. I think Leonard Stringfield investigated this case and others, but it was thick enough where it was surrounding the school and draping over telephone wires, and
Wow.
actually collected samples of it and took it to the local Lockbourne Air Force Base, who never responded about it. But later it was discovered by researchers that there was a government agency looking into this particular, cases at that time, and that one case was one that they could not figure out. But in a nearly identical case, 1 year later, in 1 week, there's a weird timing to these. It's like a book tour almost, or a concert tour, where they'll hit a school, go 2 weeks, another school, a month later, another. Every year there's 2, 3, 4 high quality cases. But there was one at Whitsett Elementary in North Carolina that was amazing, because there was over 60 kids on the playground. Principal, who's a Air Force pilot, fought in World War II, over 60 missions. And the teacher was out there as well. These silver kind of globe-shaped objects come over, brought volumes of angel hair on the playground. One kid runs over and picks it up and starts to put it in his mouth. Teacher, the principal tried to stop him. It was too late. He ate it and spit it out. Said, no, doesn't taste good. It's not cotton candy. He said it was salty and bitter. But it was really interesting because they did get a sample of it, and they sent it off to scientific labs. And they said, we can't identify this. We think it might be biological, but we really don't know what it is. It's chemically unique. You should send it to a biologist and confirm it's not spider webs. Well, they knew it wasn't spider webs because there were no spiders, and it was a massive volume of it. Yeah. You've seen spider rains before, perhaps. You can look them up. And they're very interesting, but doesn't come close to explaining this. But they sent it to a biologist. He's like, no, there's no way this is spider webs. So yeah, there's so many cases of this.
You've got a lot of cases, like with the angel hair. I always point out to people that my impression was that this happened at a certain period of time, but it really doesn't happen much anymore. It happened in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and then there may be 1 or 2 cases, but this is something, like even you said, you may not know what angel hair is. Did you find that pattern, that this is, because I get the impression, I call it the theory of wow, like you talked about the fact that they're showing off. And that's what I say. This is all like a stage play where they're trying to get people's attention and stuff. And so, it's not like the craft is having trouble and it's shooting out this angel hair. They're doing this like for display. It's like to get you to go like, what is going on here? Have you seen,
I mean, that was one of my theories, absolutely. Because angel hair, with almost 1 million documented cases we have at this point, is, I would say, exceedingly rare. There's a few hundred cases that I think are at all well known. But yeah, it does track back, quite some time, 100, 200 years, some cases, and certainly worldwide. Australia, France had a big case in Oloron school with lots of angel hair. It could be. I don't know. They definitely do put on displays.
Yeah. So that would apply to the school. So it's kind of obvious, but explain what you think they're doing with the schools. Why are these beings visiting schools?
Yeah, well, going through all the cases, because they really weren't cases of people being taken on board. There's a couple here and there where people, were a part of this incident, which involved a lot of people, and they later turned out to be contactees. But get a group of 100 people, there's going to be a couple of contactees in that group. So maybe there is a connection there, but overall, it looks very much like a part of what I think is a publicity campaign on the part of the ETs to just simply announce their presence in a very clever way, I think, because doing it to primary age students who are very much, sponges of learning and not so fearful, really, because they don't overlay their own cultural interpretations of what's going on. I mean, most of these kids had never heard of UFOs.
Yeah.
So they weren't really fearful, just really like interested, trying to figure out what's going on. It's the adults who freak out. But yeah, I think ultimately it's just a hello, because they're not, not much else is going on. But there sure are a lot of cases with humanoids. I mean,
and what kind of humanoids? Like I even heard somebody doing an interview. I was kind of shocked the other day where they were maintaining there was 5 different types of aliens. I'm like, what? 5? So how many different types of aliens just in the schools would there be? And is there a particular type of alien that shows up more than another one?
No, it's a wide variation. Grays certainly turn up. There's cases of very, very short little humanoids, hairy humanoids, a couple of tall, green, lanky ones. I mean, here's a case which shows how each one is pretty much unique, at least to a certain extent. There was a case in California. Gosh, I forget the name of the elementary school. Downey Elementary School, I think it was. At any rate, this craft showed up while the kids were on the playground, and it had windows and they could see inside of it. And they said these beings had pale skin, but kind of lumpy faces, and not the big dark eyes we normally see, kind of normalized jumpsuits. And it went and it landed in the ravine next to the school. They went back inside, came out for the next recess. This thing shows up again, circles the whole school. One of the kids had binoculars. He was passing it around, so they got a good look at it. Teachers did their best to cover it up, but one of the students went home and told her father, and he went to the school and he was furious because they were trying to, basically, they told the kids, don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And he ended up going to other parents and kids and getting a bunch of reports, called the news. They weren't interested, the police, no. He ended up reporting it to Newfork. And there is an audio file, which you can hear of him speaking with Bob Gribble. So
Oh yeah,
yeah,
I remember Bob. Yeah.
yeah, that's one case involving humanoids. But yeah, it was lumpy face, which is pretty unusual.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing is the number of, there's just an immense number of type of beings that are being described, and so you wonder why they're all appearing here at the same time, coming from wherever they're coming from. It's kind of, or unless they can portray one thing in one place and one in another. Somebody asked a question about a map. Have you got a map in your book in about to put these on a map? I don't know if that would really, like on a worldwide map, and do they make any sort of pattern or anything like that?
I didn't think to do that. I did that with the drive-in theater cases.
Oh, you did?
But these were so worldwide that I never,
Yeah.
that's a good idea though. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard to do.
And then go to what's his name? The mathematics guy. Shoot, I'm forgetting his name. I've interviewed him a number of times. He does the pi and the Jimmy Blanchette. Go to Jimmy Blanchette and give him the map, and he'll do all this, for stuff he does with the mathematics about the how it's all linked, and there may be a link in this whole thing. Now, you talked about people getting abducted. You of course know the with the Ariel School, probably the story of Emily Trim, who
Right.
has the experience where the being comes in front of her, and then she starts getting these rapid image cycle thing going in her head, and she's getting the technological images flashing, and the girl beside her is getting the environmental image. She I don't know if you know, she had a second sighting. She lives in Canada, in Hamilton, and she
Yeah.
had a second very dramatic encounter, and then she started the painting thing, and in her painting she has alien writing. And if you go to her Instagram site, it's just amazing. It's just like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of paintings of alien writing. And she says it's the most important thing. She'll have the being, and then she'll have the alien writing around the being. She said the alien writing is the best. Have you done anything on alien writing in terms of people seeing stuff? Have you got a book coming out on alien writing? Because there's a lot of this where I was actually putting a collection together. There's a guy, I'm not sure whether you're connected, you've gone on his site yet, is Chase Williams, who has the AI site. He's an AI expert out of Texas. He's actually the guy that helped me put the Admiral Wilson document on the internet. But he's got an AI site with 7 million items, and he's got alien writing as part of it. So you can put in alien writing, and it'll pop. You could probably do 100 books just using his site, because he has everything linked. 7 million items. Like the OSAP database only had 200,000 sightings. He's got 7 million. He's got out of body experience, near death experience. He's got, paintings, and he's got everything on there. It's like, so, and what was my question? Oh, so the alien writing, you haven't done anything, but you've seen it, of course. And do you think
I've certainly, heard people talk about it. In my latest book, Not From Your Volume 5, I did a chapter on alien books because, Betty Hill and Betty Andreasen both saw alien books. Jeff Selver as well.
Who's Jeff Silver? I haven't heard that case.
Yeah, he's from Canada. He's recently on the lecture circuit. Wrote a book called The Rising.
Oh, okay.
An interesting fellow. I think his case is legit, but he saw an alien book, and all these people do describe, well, not necessarily just writing, but more like a Harry Potter book with images coming to life and holograms and all kinds of knowledge, usually spiritual, but scientific as well.
Yeah,
There's a
that'd
couple
be
of
that.
books out on alien writing already, so I'm like, well, someone's already doing this.
Yeah. Well, then the other one is the guy who runs MUFON Japan had a book. They pulled a book out of the wall when he was in the craft. He tells that story. So yeah, there are. It's you get these weird patterns where you get all sorts of stuff. Now you mentioned drive-ins. Let's go to drive-ins in terms of. Oh, first I want to ask you: have you interviewed Emily Trim? Have you been? Because she sort of doesn't really want to be interviewed. She sort of was traumatized or whatever. Have you had a chance to talk to her or any of the Ariel School
No,
kids?
no, I reached out to one and briefly corresponded, but she basically was excited to see my book and said, I was one of the Ariel kids. And I'm like, oh, I'd love to talk to you, and that was about it. I
Yeah,
would love to interview Emily. I think, I heard her do a presentation. She was
yeah.
very emotional and very compelling.
Yeah, she did a couple, and she said it seems like she's sort of one of the chosen ones. Like they came back to her, and apparently the second one was way more dramatic than the first encounter. But you only hear rumors about that. But I guess she wants her privacy. But if you look on her Instagram, Emily Trim Instagram, you'll just be absolutely shocked at the paintings. She's like obsessed, one painting after another after another. And I know
Telling
some people
you,
have bought some of her paintings and stuff like that. But
those
this
schoolyard
alien writing is
encounters,
dominating.
the kids have never retracted. There's so many of them. Dolly Saffron, she's here in chat. I wrote a book, uh, Symmetry, with her, and I asked her recently, I'm like, I don't suppose you guys ever went over to school, because she's in having fully conscious encounters and piloting the craft,
Yeah.
Sky Pilots, which I pump that book all the time, just so you know, because I love
Yeah,
that you
it's
put that
always in
out.
the book, I think. I think we put Dolly in the book.
I'm like, I'm so glad, because now I'm not alone saying, this is a thing. But
Yeah.
yeah, we're going to put out Symmetry too, because I asked her about school. It's like, yeah, we did a school incident. So I'm like,
Wow.
oh my gosh, here we go.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
that there is these weird patterns, and you've got them. And like the other one, let's go to now is the drive-ins. I
mm,
never realized this, the drive-ins that you had. I don't know how many cases you had, but let's talk about drive-in movie theaters,
yeah, over
which
100. I'm telling you, it's a thing.
which maybe even some of the young people wouldn't even know what a drive-in movie theater is. I mean, that's an old one as well.
Yeah, such a shame. They're almost died out, but they're coming back a little bit. They're still there. You can find them if you
And
look
and where
hard.
do they usually appear over the right over the screen or so that people can see them?
Exactly. So this is not someone looking outside at night and look, there's a UFO. I
Yeah.
discarded, 40, 50 cases of people who just happened to look up and see a UFO fly by. No, these are absolutely 100% without a doubt being targeted. And
Oh,
here's why I'm so convinced of that. My first case came from a lady at work, Claudia Blasios, who found out I was a UFO researcher and jumped up and down. So I've got to tell you what happened to me. In 1972, she was at the Paramount Theater Drive-In in Paramount, Southern California, with her family, and a UFO appeared right next to the screen. She did not see it arrive. She just suddenly noticed her parents were entranced. People were dropping their popcorn, screeching out of the theater. Looks and sees this giant disc right next to the screen, almost the width of the screen itself,
wow.
but below the screen. And that's all she really remembers. They had some weird sort of amnesia involved with this, because they didn't remember it until years later. That does turn up in some of these cases. But I thought this has got to be a one-off. I've never heard of this. And it wasn't until years later I was writing UFOs over various states and was covering Colorado. And I got one at the Mile High Theater when people watching Dr. Zhivago, and then another one, and then another one, 3 in a row. It's like,
Wow.
gosh, could this be a thing? First thing I did was scour every book I had. None. I found one case in all my books, Ryan Sprague's Somewhere in the Skies, which is a great book.
Yeah.
But then I dived into the UFO news clipping service and MUFON and APRO, all the databases and the magazines, and I hit pay dirt. I
Yeah.
was knocked over. This slid under my radar, and I think really everybody's radar. I found 100 cases, and in most of these cases, they come right down over the screen, right on top or either side, and we'll put on again a display. These are very low level, they're long lasting. They will sometimes turn on their lights and flash. And there's sometimes, conversation in terms of cars turning on their headlights and blinking, and the UFOs blinking back.
Is that right?
Or they will dart around and put on a little dance. Or in some cases, they're releasing smaller craft and going on for anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes to 20 minutes or longer. And
Wow.
gosh, these cases are off the charts. Can I tell you one of my favorite?
Oh, sure, yeah.
I love this case, which took place at the Terrace Inn in Bakersfield in 1952, right when
Yeah.
it was ramping up.
Yeah.
And this UFO shows up. This one, most are saucer shaped, but all shapes really, egg
Yeah.
shaped, spherical, you name it. This one was kind of cigar shaped, comes down and hovers right above the screen. I mean, dropped down, stopped right over the screen, flashed all its lights at everybody, and off it went. Well, on the briefer side of most of these cases, there was an army guy in the audience. The early cases, most of them weren't recorded unless there was a military guy watching. And he was in the audience, and he called the local sheriff station. And this is, in Bakersfield, Southern California. Sheriff Leroy Hatfield takes
Wow.
the call and hangs up the phone and gets 4 calls in a row. Finally, he says, I'm coming down there. There's still 100 people there, all wanting to give their testimony. He takes about 30 of them. He says, I'm done. I think I know what you saw, or, I've got the details. I'll make a report. He sends it off, and he writes it up that night, sends it to Edwards Air Force Base, to the precursor of Project Blue Book, Grudge or Sign. And I found this report online, declassified. It was so interesting because it was marked action on top, gave all the details, and it was sent the next day, get this, to the commanding general of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the commanding general. Also, the head of intelligence at Washington, D.C., also to Ent Air Force Base in Colorado, where we're tracking incoming and outgoing traffic. So any denials about the reality of UFOs are absolutely disingenuous. They knew. I've got another case exactly like that in, I think it was Georgia, actually. 1 year later or 1 year earlier. They knew, they absolutely knew what was going on right in the beginning. Not one of these, by the way, made the unidentified list of Blue Book. They would always say it's a balloon, or
Yeah.
it's a shooting star.
Yeah.
Which was ridiculous because there's just no way you can explain these as a balloon, not even close.
Wow. Now the driving, the only experience I had with the driving, it's kind of weird that I'd never heard, because I've been in a long time, 49 years, but the one I had was the first sighting that got me involved was when they had caught this thing on the ground, and it did the opposite of the Nimitz. The Nimitz went from 80,000 feet down to sea level in 7/8 of a second. This went from the ground, was being filmed by a TV crew from ground to 5,000 feet in 3 frames, 1/8 of a second.
Oh, wow.
And when they had guys on the ground that had surrounded this thing, had gone in close, and one got within maybe a quarter mile of it, and they described it as a drive-in movie screen. It was like red, and it was like looked like a drive-in movie screen, except it wasn't touching the ground, and it was hovering behind these trees. And then they looked around, and it was gone, and they didn't realize it had jumped up in the sky, and they thought it disappeared. It moved so fast up into the sky. So that's kind of surprised me, that the driving, because I never heard that. I'd heard like the angel hair. I'd heard a lot of the schools and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
I never heard it either. There was one case, Prince Edward Island, Canada, where it came so often they were putting it in their marquee. You want to see a UFO? Come to our theater, because it kept happening. I mean,
Wow.
one guy I interviewed firsthand, because a lot of these I did trace from
Yeah.
various, this almost never made international news. It did make local newspapers quite often.
Yeah.
But I interviewed this guy, Pat Mitchell, who was at the South Hutch Drive-In in Hutchinson, Kansas, when a UFO showed up during a James Bond movie, right at the most climax moment. It's often how they do it. It's right in the beginning of the movie or right during the most interesting part. And his friend's like, do you see that? There's a light. And it approached right up, parked right to the right of the screen, stayed there 5 minutes or so, went behind the screen. This is a huge screen. So this craft, he could tell pretty much exactly that it was 50 feet across.
Okay.
Went to the other side, rose up a little bit. Everyone's getting out of their car. They're looking at it. There's over 100 cars there. This thing, as if to make sure that everyone saw it, went and did a whole revolution around the entire parking lot, parked again over the screen, moved to the side, went down the exit way, and started traveling down the street at about 10 miles an hour. Every car, there was a huge convoy, not every car, but
Yeah.
Pat Mitchell and 40 or 50 cars, he said, followed this thing down for, I think it was 6 miles, where it
Wow.
parked again. And they were all parked there on the road, watching this thing finally go straight up. It's a little tiny star-like object and it's gone.
Wow.
A 20-minute long case.
Now, I want to ask you about synchronicities because you mentioned like you've done these theme books and you describe how it starts, you get one case and then you start investigating, you realize there's all these. When I did the Sky Pilot book, I had the one woman from Arizona tell me the story and I thought she was crazy. And then suddenly it was like the synchronicity. Suddenly all these people started coming to me and they were telling the same story. And I'm going like, so is this, am I supposed to tell this story? It's almost like they wanted me to tell the story and they were sending these people to me. So I don't want to ask you about the synchronicity. Do you think you're called? Do you think this is your job, that you're getting synchronistic events where they're giving you these stories and telling you, do this one next, do this one next? Because you seem to be, in terms of the numbers that you get, and you're either a really good researcher or you're getting a lot of lucky calls in terms of people coming to you with these stories.
Yeah, well, I saw Dolly nodding. Yeah, yeah, there's an incredible level of synchronicity there. That's happened quite often with me, and I hear it from others. Synchronicity is a huge thing in this field in particular, for some reason.
Yeah.
I do feel a sense of guidance there. Kind of always knew I was going to be doing something along these lines. Not UFOs. I didn't believe in them. I came into this field as a complete skeptic.
Yeah.
And it was a huge shock in 1986 at age 21 when I found out it was real. But yeah,
Same age as I had. Yeah, same age as me. So that may another synchronicity.
I have no doubt that there's a level of guidance here because, put out a book and then I'll have a sighting. And at some point I realized, gosh, they know about me.
Yeah.
I finally did get some really good evidence of that. They're watching over everything real closely, but
Yeah.
anything to do with UFO researchers, as soon as I started researching this subject, that's when I started having sightings.
Yeah, let's go to the beginning because I've started an orb site as well, and I had experiences with, we called them ground lights back in 1975. We were filming them around and stuff like that, and I'm big into orbs and have had a lot of Zoom meetings with people with probably a million photographs between all these people that were coming on these conferences and stuff like that. So talk about your how it started for you, how you got dragged into this thing, and then tell me your story about the orb sighting and where you're driving the car. That I love that story.
Okay, you remember that one.
Oh yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I was a skeptic. I thought everyone in my family was. Some of them were keeping secrets. Some friends and coworkers were, basically lying to me. Not really, withholding information, I guess, be the better term. But I do remember my brother came running into the house when I was 13 years old or so, at 1978.
Yeah.
And said, I saw a UFO. And I'm like, no, you didn't, Mark. They're not real. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
And he was really disappointed that none of us really wanted to hear what he had to say. But fast forward to 1986, there was that really famous sighting by Captain Kenji Chirochi
Oh yeah.
over Alaska.
Alaska. Yeah, with the plane.
Yeah, that was on the evening news. Tom Brokaw, Dan Rather, one of those guys was talking about it. I'm like, huh, look at that. And there's the pilot. What an idiot. He's going to lose his job, I bet. Of course he did. But it opened up that little, chink in my armor. And I asked Mark, my brother, what he saw, and he described an incredible sighting. He had witnesses. I thought, everyone was alone, but no, it turned out I knew a lot of people who had had encounters. All of them, pretty much without exception, had witnesses to corroborate their encounter. And it snowballed from there. My father knew a lieutenant colonel who claimed to work next to Project Blue Book. So that turned out to be my first interview. Lieutenant Colonel Duncan Wilmore was a real bust. He just towed the party line, said, there's nothing to it. You're deluded. I'm like, I don't think so. But I started doing formal interviews. I joined MUFON. I took their test. I started writing articles pretty quick. For about 10 years, I wrote articles before I put out my first book. I mean, it took over my life pretty quickly, but
That's everybody, yeah.
yeah. Oh, and the orbit sighting, yeah. It
Yeah,
was 1992, July. I was in the middle of investigating this huge wave of sightings over my hometown. There's that synchronicity again. I'm like, this
yeah,
is impossible.
yeah.
Topanga Canyon, where I grew up. And this is a major wave involving every type of encounter, cars being chased, landings, people being pulled on board, lots of sightings. I mean, it was a big deal. They were calling the police, the local newspaper, and it went on for about 2 years. But at any rate, this was the beginning of it, literally, because it started on June 14th. So it's late July, and I'm at my brother Mark's house, and Christy, she's the artist for my books and also a
Yeah.
contactee, as it turns out. Uh, and I'm like, it's getting late. I've got to go home. They were helping me try to just digest and deal with this
Did you
onslaught
know
of.
she was a contactee at the time when this happened?
No, I did
Okay,
not. I don't think she was quite ready to share that with me.
okay, okay.
Uh, but Mark certainly. I mean, he had an implant in his arm. I took him to see a doctor, who was a UFO researcher. He freaked out. He goes, what is this thing? Mark's like, I don't know. It appeared like it turned out about around that time. He said it's been there for years. It's now gone. It just disappeared.
Wow.
So anyway, that's a tangent.
Yeah.
I was at their house late July, got I'm saying July 20th or so, and it got late. So I'm like, I got to go home. I got to work, because UFOs don't really make money. They certainly wasn't making a dime back then.
Yeah.
Uh, and they lived in Woodland Hills. It's a very dense suburb right outside of Los Angeles on Golondrina Street. It's about 5 minutes to Canoga Avenue, not even 3 minutes. I'm just about to reach it. I'm coming around a hairpin corner, which is very steep, very tight. You can't take it more than 5 miles an hour. And I saw what I thought at first was a bird swooping towards my car. I looked up, it wasn't. I thought, well, could that be a firecracker? No, it's coming towards me. And it was a ball of light, about yay big, bigger than a golf ball, but not a tennis ball.
Yeah.
Kind of ping pong, maybe. Yellow, well, mostly white, but slight yellow tones, hard edged, not brilliant by any means, but absolutely self-illuminated, and stops in front of my car windshield, right over the hood of the car. I mean, as far
Yeah.
away as I am from my computer,
Yeah.
and it's looking at me. I mean, I'm getting a sense of like, okay, who are you? It moved back and forth, back and forth. One more time, stopped, went forward, and off it went. And I forgot the whole darn thing. Completely forgot about it for 3 months. Finally remembered it. And we always say, well, that's my sighting, until someone said, well, what happened? Do you remember driving home? I don't. I think, piecing the pieces together, pretty sure I had missing time.
Yeah.
Because I've seen UFOs since. You always call someone, you always write it down, you get real excited. I didn't do any of that. I have no idea what happened.
You've never been regressed on any of the events you've had or to try to recall stuff or anything?
No, I haven't, but I've done a lot of meditation and getting some recall for sure. Now it's hard to piece which incident belongs to,
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
sighting forth, but I do remember being in craft. As a young man, we were in this one room that was quite large and round, and there were these little tables, and we were all being shown what amounts to free energy devices. I remember looking for plugs, and they're like, no, 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 no. Just
Wow.
just watch how it works. All boys, by the way, no girls were there, which I thought was odd.
Mhm.
Big round room. Finally, they took us off to the edge and turned the wall transparent, and you could see the Milky Way. And there's a very famous picture where you can see the Milky Way in its glory. Lots of pictures like that, but doesn't compare to seeing it. I mean, it was the most dazzling, magnificent sight I've ever seen in my life. I cannot find words to, portray how amazing it was. That's one of, several clear memories I have.
And you, as a young boy, like you're talking like young kids as well?
No, we were all young men. I would say
Oh,
20s. I had
okay.
hair, I
Yeah,
had hair.
there,
So,
yeah. So I
so
died when I was 20.
I can date it. That could very well be that July incident. I don't know for sure,
Yeah.
but I have a feeling at some point I talk to them and they're like, well, what do you want to do with your life? Would you consider working with us? course, yes.
Yeah.
And kind of my mission to just get the word out about UFOs, that they're here, plain and simple.
Yeah, you've done a good job. I mean, you've got a lot of very interesting books. Let's go to the healing one. You dealt with a guy out of Winnipeg with the blue orb. You can maybe talk a little bit about him, Jim, and you did a book on healing. So I knew about his case because I was there. He told me the story, and he told me about the sending the shirt off and stuff like that with a stain, and I saw some of the, I don't know what he did with his material, but he had 5 terabytes of film of things in the backyard and things making triangles in the sky and stuff like that. So talk a little bit about the healing stuff because people may not realize, because you always hear the good aliens and the bad aliens, and there's these bad aliens and stuff, and it's like, yeah, but how do you explain the healing thing? So go through the book that you wrote. You wrote 1 book or 2 books on healing?
Two.
Two.
Initially
Okay,
it was
so
my first book, 1996, UFO Healings, 100 cases, because I'd run into a lady who was healed of a cyst in her fallopian tubes.
yeah,
And I thought, gosh, there's the 2 police officers from Damon, Texas, McCoy and Good. One was cured of a pet baby alligator bite on his finger.
wow,
There was a customs official from Peru who was healed of rheumatism and nearsightedness after being struck by a beam of light. A case of a little girl in Brazil healed of cancer, one of the first cases out there. Of course, the Jacques Vallée case in France involving a medical doctor who was cured of an axe wound on his foot and partial paralysis from the Algerian War. These were some of the famous cases. I'm like, I wonder if there's more out there. And of course there was. And after I found like 30 cases in a couple of weeks, I'm like, this is more than an article. Maybe I should write a book on this. It became my first book. I've since re-released it, The Healing Power of UFOs, with 300 cases,
wow.
because all major researchers have these cases. You pointed me to the guy who had
Jim
Crohn's disease.
Jim Schaefer.
No, Jim Schaefer is one, but gosh, the guy who wrote UFO of God
Oh,
just recently,
oh yeah, Chris
um,
Bledsoe. Yeah,
Chris Bledsoe, right?
yeah,
But yeah, I talked to Jim Schaefer as well. What a nice guy. He's the only one, as far as I know, who's filmed the thing that healed him, because it came
yeah,
right into his body. And he filmed it.
yeah.
And he sent me his medical records, by the way.
Oh, you did? I haven't seen those. Yeah,
Uh, uh, and yeah, basically proving that he had cancer
yeah,
on his lymph nodes, a big tumor, and he was very upfront with his doctors. God bless him, because most people aren't.
yeah.
And he was going for surgery, and of course the tumor was gone. He woke up, it was gone.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, there's necrotic tissue, we're not sure, but it looks like it's gone. And they wrote on his file like spontaneous healing. They
Is
couldn't
that
put,
right?
yeah, they
Wow.
couldn't put ETs healed, because they can't. They did
Yeah,
not see it. They weren't there. They have to be scientific about this. I get it.
yeah,
But yeah, they could not find any cancer. And
yeah,
I call that the last minute syndrome. They will often wait till a person is on their way to the doctor or in the
yeah.
hospital. 10-15% of the cases are in the hospital.
Wow.
Crazy. But so many cases. I mean, like, of course, Hopkins and Jacobs and Mack all have them, but you, Grant, have covered some. Uh, Philip Mantle, Tim Beckley, Brad Steiger, Yvonne Smith, Barbara Lamb, Edith Fiore, you name it. Every major researcher who's looked into direct contact cases, pretty
Yeah.
much without exception, has these cases.
But you put them all
Usually,
together. That was the important thing. You've got the books where you can go one after another, which really makes the point. I mean, this is not random. Like if I get one or you get one or Jacobs gets one, they go, well, they misinterpreted or whatever. When you get 300 of them, then you get into this whole thing, which I guess we can go to now. Is you and I think, are on the same page about the evil alien thing. It's like, oh, these evil aliens, they're here to, we're victims and all this kind of stuff. And to talk about your impression about this whole argument about evil aliens, good aliens, and
yeah. Well, I think there's a very fear-based media, and it's becoming more and more clear to me that our own governments, or secret governments, or call them what you want, are pushing an ET threat narrative. There's MILABs, military abductions, which are quite negative, and I think do
yeah,
exist. And I kind of bought into that party line, initially. I'm like, gosh, this is horrible. People are being kidnapped against their will and experimented on by these emotionless ETs.
Yeah.
But pretty quickly I started to turn around because I kept getting these healing cases. And people were like, don't call me an abductee. That's not accurate. I was invited on board. I would not trade this experience for anything.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people, and this is generally a rule. It's very scary in the beginning. But
Yeah.
after collecting every case I could and every person I've interviewed, I couldn't find any cases of outright sadism or torture or any of the horrible things we do to each other. Yes, it can be very scary. And the worst I generally hear is people being physically examined and they're fighting it the whole way. They don't like it. It's a negative experience for them. But once you get past that, because more than likely you're going to be pulled on board again, they will show you the engine room. They'll take you to the control room and sit you in the chair and like, here's how you pilot the craft.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or to the observation deck and look, there's the earth below. Always don't be afraid. We're not here to hurt you. Calm down. Why are you screaming? You're gonna be fine. Of course, there's the warnings and the messages that people get, which are very much for our benefit. Warnings against pollution, like Emily Trin talked about, the misuse of technology, nuclear weapons, greed, corruption, war, aggression, chopping down the forests, the destruction of the environment. So these are ultimately, if you take a good look, a good objective look at what happens when someone's taken on board, I think you start to see a clearer picture of what's really going on here.
Yeah.
And if you kind of just remove the fear, because fear distorts perception. We know this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And you even get it in, like, I do these crossovers. So I look at like near-death experience where the people have the negative near-death experience and it's come to that same thing. They don't want to let go. They're fighting it. Same as psychedelics. I mean, I did 28 high dose psilocybin experiences, and I had 5 that were bad, had bad periods, like moments where the fear took over and stuff like that. And it was the old idea that once you surrender, it's like boom, it's over. It's kind of like you're in the opposite side where everything is good. And it's this idea of the first time you're taken or you see a being in your room, of course you're going to freak out. But the more, I think the Free Foundation showed that the more experiences you have, the more positive the people see the experience. The first one, yeah, you because you don't understand what's going on, and we are in a fear-based society where, fear sells, and you want to play the victim, and it's poor old me and stuff like that. But once you talk to people, they'll say, like you pointed out, this is the best thing that ever happened to me, and I don't want it to stop. I think the free survey showed that when they asked them if you had a chance to stop this, would you stop this? And I think it was 83% said no, don't stop it, just keep it going.
Yeah, I found about 3 or 4 people who said, no, I don't like this. I hate it. One guy is very religious. He still feels it's demonic. It's not my job to try to pull him off of
Yeah.
his interpretation. It's his experience. So I respect that. I talked to a guy in England who, had kind of a mixed bag of experiences. But he says, well, it did make me super psychic. I started having all these out-of-body experiences and precognition and mediumship and all kinds of stuff. So, and
Yeah, you
that's
can
a
maybe
rule.
talk. Can you
Yeah.
talk a little bit about that from your experience? Because I found that as well, is that once you have the UFO sighting, you think, oh, it's just a sighting in the sky, and then all of a sudden you start having reports, and you're psychic, and all this kind of stuff, and that's where they came to the idea, like with Chris Bledsoe, when the military people went there. It's sort of like, why you, right? Because he had all these abilities to heal and he precognition and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit about that, where you get it's not just UFO sightings, you get all this other weird stuff that starts happening around people, or even the skin, where they talk about the hitchhiker, and they try to turn it into the fear thing. They have these special forces guys who take the stuff home, and then you go, well, that's an attachment and a ghost experience. That happens all the time when you get into the paranormal phenomena. It'll follow you around because you get attached to something, or you break the veil, or whatever happens. So talk a little bit about that for people that may not understand that it's not just UFOs. It gets a little more complex than that, and there's other things that end up being tied into this.
Yeah. Well, very early on, I started, improving my interviewing skills. Because one lady's like, well, I did have this sighting, but our house is haunted. I'm like, ghosts. Oh, I don't want to go there, but okay. And I mean, that was one of my earliest interviews, a family friend,
Yeah.
and started learning about ghosts, and of course that led immediately to near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences and precognition. Had a family friend who levitated as a child. Of
Wow.
course, Bigfoot reared its ugly head pretty early on.
You must have fought that. I think you fought that, right? Same as me. I fought that. I go like, no, no. But then I had the one sighting where, like, if you know where we live, I mean, we live on the prairies, and the national tree here is a telephone pole. There are no trees, so it's like we have this joke about you can let your dog go and watch him run away for days. It's so flat and there's no trees, and this Sasquatch was looking in this window, and then it went into this little bush behind the house and into the clearing, and the footprint stopped in the snow. And then I go like, oh, there's no way this is not hiding here, isn't it? And so I fought it, but I think you fought that as well. This idea that's too far. I mean, the
Yeah.
Sasquatch thing is too far.
I had a sneaking suspicion it might be real, and it was opening a can of worms, and that would be a whole other investigation. And of course, I was right. It was real. It was a whole investigation. I ended up writing a book about it just to clarify it in my own mind.
About Sasquatches?
Yep.
And what was
Yep.
it called?
Um, Bigfoot, apes, and other wildmen.
Wow.
I got a contract from a great publisher, Chelsea House, or one of these major publishers. So I'm like, oh
Wow.
right, of course I'm gonna do it. What are you kidding?
Yeah.
But yeah, I wrote Supernatural California, which covered the Bigfoot history in California state. So yeah,
Wow.
it's real. There's no doubt. I ended up having my own audible encounter with a Bigfoot
Tell
with
me
a
about that.
when a witness called me. She's a contactee, by the way, but she's like, I've got this Bigfoot harassing me. I think it can read my mind. I'm afraid it's going to kidnap me. I'm like, don't worry, they don't kidnap people. That turned out not to be true. There are cases of kidnappings, which I had to tell her later. But
Well, to explain that, because I dealt with Ron Johnson, and he had encounters with them, but they took him. I mean, he volunteered to go through this beam of light, and he was in this cave with them and stuff like that. And he was a Sasquatch hunter as well. He had a lot of UFO contact experiences. So, what do you mean by abductions, where they grab people in terms of?
yeah, there's about 20, 30 cases. If you really dig in deep, you can find them. There's one very famous by Albert Ostman, who said that basically he was picked up and dragged to their camp. This is well known in the Native American oral traditions.
Okay.
It's not super common, but there's a good number of cases. There's one involving two hunters where one guy was picked up and it ran with him for like 300 yards and threw him down. This sort of thing. So, I mean, they can be territorial and somewhat hostile, but many more cases of them being very friendly as well. Lifting a fallen tree off a person, leading another person out of who got lost. I've got a case personally of that. 3 people who got lost in the woods were led out by a Sasquatch, they believe. But another person bit by a snake was carried to camp, this sort of thing. People trading. It's really, the Bigfoot is really interesting. And I think there's definitely a paranormal aspect because people talk about how they disappear, turn invisible, and I mean, there's telepathic communication and even a Bigfoot or UFO connection as
And
well.
your contact was what? You had the
Yeah, this lady I talked to, she says, well, it's out here. I can show you the tree it was in. You can talk to my son and my roommate. They saw it. So I did, of course. This is in Acton on the opposite side of the LA National Forest, which borders LA and is huge, by the way. It's a 500,000 acres.
wow. Okay.
So it's an enormous wilderness area. And I looked it up. Of course, there's a big Bigfoot history there. I'm like, okay, well, all right. I did not know. But I went to her house, which is right off the 5 freeway, about 3, 4 miles down off the 5 and
Okay.
the 14 freeway in Acton, Lancaster, that area. And she's like, I know where it lives. Here's the tree. Talked to my son. He's like, yeah, it was the monkey man. It broke the branch. A branch this big in the tree just
Wow.
snapped right off. She had a big knock on her roof one night. Went up there was a boulder on her roof. Took 3 men to get it off. Bigfoot are all about rock throwing and this
Yeah.
sort of thing. But at any rate, she's like, I can show you where I think it lived. I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's bring our equipment. We'll get some footage. And we drove off down this dirt road into this deep kind of canyon and got up there around dusk because that's when it starts to show up usually. and it was already dark in this ravine. I'm like, huh, but it was so steep you couldn't climb it unless you were, I mean, it would take,
Yeah.
it was thick with brush, very steep. And she had just gotten out of the car and was opened the back door and was pulling out the sound equipment. You know, we had this great sound equipment and cameras. And I'm standing in front of the car surveying the area when I heard it roar. And I thought, is that a plane coming overhead? Of course, I knew it wasn't because there's nothing overhead, but I looked anyway. And I'm like, what the heck? It roared for a good 20 seconds, 30
Wow.
seconds. And
Wow.
it vibrates in your chest. And she stands up and tears start coming out of her eyes. She's white as a sheet. It roars again. And now I can pinpoint it.
Yeah.
It's right there in that ravine. I go running towards it. She gets absolutely hysterical. She's like, what are you doing? I want to see it. She's like, oh, we're leaving. And she was so hysterical, I had to leave. She says it roared 3 times. I'm pretty sure, you know, I've become a very much a trained observer, self-trained, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm pretty sure it was twice, but I don't know, because it was a huge surprise. And off we went. But I heard it roar, and I've heard lions roar at the zoo. I was right next to the lion when it roared. I love bears. I've got every bear book, every bear documentary. We lived next to a cougar when I was a kid. You know, I know animals pretty well, and it was none of those. It was, I don't know what it was, a Bigfoot.
Wow, fascinating. I mean, I haven't had that experience. And you mentioned the branches breaking, which is I did a thing on signs. Maybe you can talk to your experience with signs where why do they need to break branches? Like in this incident I had, there was like, and it's always like up 10 feet up where they break the branches as they're going in the forest, as if they're doing this to give you some sort of indication that, yeah, this is a real experience. This is not just something you're going to imagine. And they leave footprints and stuff like that. And then the footprints disappear and people appear with marks on their arms and stuff. So talk a little bit about the experiences that you've had in terms of people getting these signs that from different phenomena.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of personal cases. I will tell you some rock throwing cases
Okay.
because they,
Yeah.
they 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 do love throwing rocks, and it's amazing because they're very good at it. And
Yeah.
they, you know, the people were in a cabin up in, gosh, Kern County, I think it was, and they ended up leaving because they're apparently territorial, and I think that's a lot of what's going on here. They mark their territory by knocking the top of a tree out, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
But at any rate, they were throwing rocks at the cabin to the point where they just had to go.
Is
There's
that
case
right?
after cases, yeah, of them throwing rocks right by you and that close to your head, not hitting you
Yeah.
though. I'm like,
Wow.
wow, you know, they are definitely sending a message like, get out. And there are people who are walking along and suddenly feel dread, fear sweep over them for no apparent reason. This comes up in some UFO cases too, or they cannot even take a step forward. I think that's them exerting telepathically this emotion, because there's enough cases where I really started to question what's going on here. I haven't dived super deep into the Bigfoot because
Yeah.
it's a lot dealing with all of this stuff.
And there's a lot of people. I didn't realize how many people actually do research on Bigfoot,
Yeah,
Sasquatch. I couldn't
I
believe it.
mean, I'm trying to cover a lot of bases here because I've looked into demons because there's all these people who think, oh, it's demonic, and angels, of course, and multiple personalities and near-death experiences and channeling. I'm really trying to make sure that I can get a whole picture here of what's going on because it is all connected. Like I said earlier, the vast majority of contactees are profoundly psychic, but it's a two-way street. An onboard experience, for sure, you're going to start having poltergeist stuff going on, dreams that come true, out-of-body experiences, physical levitation even. I did a whole chapter on that because I found about 20 cases where it wasn't the ETs lifting them up. People physically levitated following an encounter. I had a guy call me from Europe crying because I covered this. He's like, I'm so glad you covered this. No one believes me. This happened to me. I had an encounter and I started flying around in my room when I was a kid. I did
Wow.
it many times. But it's a two-way street. ETs are also very interested in people who have developed this ability. I think honestly, it's one of their main agendas, missions. It's all about healing. When someone's pulled on board and physically examined, it's pretty much in my assessment about healing, but about informing people as well, giving them warnings, but also about waking people up to our own, and I won't even call it supernatural paranormal, it's natural, our own abilities of mediumship and precognition and healing. It's huge. That's nodding. Yes, telling you this is why they're so intent on this. If we could all become telepathic, just think how quick the world would change.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. And that's where I think it's important that people realize that it's more than UFOs. You start to realize the bottom line of this thing, how complex it is and how it shows you how reality works. And you start to realize, oh, it's like I always describe it as being in the Super Bowl. When you suddenly realize what's actually going on here, it's not just people seeing UFOs. It's very, very complex, and it starts to, they're sort of indirectly showing us what's going on without sitting down and giving us a left brain lecture. They're sort of making us figure it out for ourselves and just giving us these little hints and clues and breadcrumbs and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Now
it's up
I
to
want to get
us.
to the out of body experience, but I want to maybe pick your brain about we're going to get into dead people and how all this end works. But people on craft, have you had dogs, animals, people, dead people? You had a lot of that. Have you done any sort of writing up about that, about this people encountering dead people on board the craft? Because that's what, if you remember, Annie Strieber said, Whitley, whatever we're dealing with, it has something to do with death.
Yeah, well, I think people are trying to conflate a lot of these phenomena as one, and I'm not in that school of thought. The Jacques Vallée thing
Okay.
that this is not even extraterrestrial. I think it is extraterrestrial. I really do. Having had some of my own experiences and talked to so many people, and I think a Bigfoot experience is a Bigfoot experience and a near death and so forth. There's a lot going on here, a lot's put under the UFO umbrella. But I'm fully aware of some of these cases. I've had a couple, not a lot. I did talk to Don Anderson of Spanish Fork, Utah, I think. A devout Mormon at the time he started having fully conscious encounters, which, kind of shattered his belief system a little bit. But at one point was pulled on board and said he saw his deceased father and was able to communicate with them. And I'm glad at that time I had done a lot of research, was able to understand that, when someone has an onboard experience, there is an interdimensional aspect to it. I think the ETs have absolute understanding of what we would call the other side. And a lot of people they have out-of-body experiences and meet deceased loved ones and near-death experiences and so forth. This can be facilitated on board a craft. This is what I think is happening here. Because I've talked to some people who've had essentially a near-death experience, and it had UFO attributes to it. There were aliens there. They saw aliens, not their deceased loved ones, which could be, them in a past life or their people, if you know what I mean. So there is some really interesting bleed-throughs going on here, but I'm hesitant to say that this is all one thing, because I don't see good evidence for that. The vast majority of people who see a Bigfoot, for example, aren't going to have a UFO encounter, and vice versa. But there's 50 or 100 cases where these two phenomena intersect perfectly. I honestly think some Bigfoot are contactees. I know how that must sound, but I believe they're sentient, intelligent, and like all beings on this planet have some relationship with ETs. So yeah, I have a few cases involving that sort of connection, but the vast majority, no. The UFO experience follows a pretty set pattern. And while each case does have unique elements, that doesn't turn up a whole lot. Not in my, case files.
I've had quite a few. I don't know if you talked to Ron Johnson, where he actually gets taken to the spirit world by LB, the being that he's dealing with, and he was with his dead mother, and she takes him into this little Mormon temple he sees there, and he said when he got in the building, he said, Grant, he said it was like 10 or 100 times the size inside. And I'm going, hey, that's what the UFO people say about being inside a UFO. So is he in a UFO or is he in the spirit world with his mother? And then she shows him the crystals, this whole idea of the crystals, looking at a certain angle. You can see your whole life and stuff. I've had a bit, but let's
I
get to
think
out of body
both.
experiences.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I would just say, I think it can be both. The ETs do take people on what amounts to a spiritual journey. I do have a few cases of that. Absolutely.
Yeah, I find that sort of fascinating because I ran into a few cases and then I started looking and it was like a lot of this sort of bleed through. But anyway, let's get to out of body experiences because that's where I wanted to ask you some questions about your experience. So a lot of people here will know what it is. A lot of people have tried it. You got a technique. You've written a book and you're writing your second book on it. So talk a little bit about out of body experience, why this is important, and it may be just as important as UFOs, or maybe even more important because when you've had an out of body experience, then you suddenly realize it's not the nuts and bolts world we think it is.
Exactly. It, it's funny because it happened at the same time I started doing UFO research. Exactly.
Wow.
So there's a synchronicity there for sure, which I think is not coincidental because so many people I've talked to, even having a simple sighting, will start having out of body experiences. So there's a connection there for sure. And I know of quite a few cases where that connection turns up. For me, it's something I pursued following the death of my mother in 1984. I saw her spirit a couple of weeks later and started having really lucid dreams where she'd come into my room. And I was absolutely sure it was her, but I knew it couldn't be because there was no such thing as life after death. And so I was at a crossroads. I was really kind of trying to figure things out. I'm either crazy or this is really happening. So I was pretty upset about it. And my whole belief system had pretty much shattered at that point when I had my first OBE, which happened after I picked up Robert Monroe's book, Far Journeys, a great book, my favorite on the subject. And he described his own experiences in vivid detail and how to do it. And basically, it's just relaxing and visualizations, affirmations, this sort of thing. An out of body experience, for those I'm sure most of you know, but it's when you perceive yourself in a dream body or an astral body separate from your physical body. So I was doing the exercises for about a month or two, immediately doubled my dream recall, started having really lucid dreams, or pre-lucid probably would be better because I didn't quite understand what was going on. But a month and a half in, I laid down one afternoon, kind of depressed. I was going through a lot and felt what's called the vibratory state. And that's like an electric shock. You probably jerked when you're lying in bed. That's kind of what it feels like, but it's continuous. And I was just vibrating at this real high intensity and then popped out, floated across the room, out of control, into the hallway, into the bathroom, grabbed the counter, looked at the mirror. I couldn't see anything. I'm like, oh my God, I'm doing it. There is life after death. You can go out of body in an instant. I knew this and became extremely excited. And any strong emotion will pull you right back in. So I was pulled back in. I saw someone in my room, some short little guy. I couldn't quite make out who it was. I'm like, hey, who are you? Tried to grab him, couldn't, and plopped back into my body and woke up. I'm like, oh my God, my family's going to think I've lost my mind when I tell them this. Of course, they did. I'm like, no, I've had an out of body experience. I'm going to do it again. And I did it the next weekend. Same exact thing, pretty much. Did it third time. I would usually do it on weekends because I could sleep late. And that gave me enough time to really meditate.
You
Third
do it in the
time I
morning
woke
or
up,
at night?
usually early morning. But the
Okay.
third time it was the middle of the night, I just woke up standing next to my bed. I had a lot of vertigo. It's a sign I've learned.
Yeah.
And finally I just cleared my head and I looked down and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in bed. Oh no, I'm dead. I died. What have I done? I've died. I'm dead.
Yeah.
I was horrified and I dived back into my body and filled it up. It was such a weird feeling and kind of just clicked in there and fit back into my meat suit and sat up in bed. Almost forgot, but remembered, and my emotions at 180-degree turn. I'm like, wow, I did it. So I dived deep. In that year, I really meditated and I would have them pretty much every weekend, pop out and be like, yeah, I did it, right back in. 20 times until I finally popped out. I'm like, calm down. and I was able to walk around well, I couldn't walk. I had to learn how to move. I had a lot of trouble seeing, but I was able to remain out for a good 10, 20 seconds and increase that to 2 to 5 minutes and then an hour after about a year. And yeah, I walked through walls, I would fly up through the roof, fly around the house, and started getting more brave and going to other people's homes and friends and family usually. And just kind of snowballed from there.
Okay, so when you went to visit, you went to visit Dolly. So talk about how you go to a certain spot. Like, is it like remote viewing where you put in your intention where you want to go and then you go there? Do you actually, it takes you 5 minutes to fly there, or are you suddenly there?
It's like remote viewing. I think remote viewing is a form of it. It's different, but I learned how to do it. I would, pop out. If you have an intention, a plan, it works much better. And the other side is where I started having a lot more fun, because you can learn about past lives and visit deceased loved ones and go to healing temples and places of learning and meet enlightened masters and go to the Akashic Library and crazy stuff. I mean, you can do just about anything. And I learned if you basically command, it works best. Because I would ask, I'd be like, Mom, where are you? Or I want to see a past life. No, to really be good at it, you just intend it. You say, I go now here to Area 51, to the moon. I did both of those. Sounds crazy, but I would read about it. I'm like, well, if they can do it, why not me? And I would go to my family, and they'd sometimes be awake, and never did they see me, ever, not once. Sometimes I go to the other side, and we're all there. The whole family would be there, my brothers and sisters, my deceased mother and other deceased loved ones, and living people too. I talked to them. I had an argument with my brother. He was alive. I'm like, oh, you're here. We're out of body. Do you know that? He's like, well, yeah, I know. I'm like, well, are you going to remember it? He's like, no. I don't have that ability. You know that. I'm like, but how can you say that? We're here now. I'm going to remember. If I can, you can. He's like, I can't do it. And we had an argument. He's like, just stop. Stop talking to me. I can't remember. I had the same argument with my sister. I'm like, I'm going to try something, because you can project thought forms and make beautiful scenes of trees and rivers or whatever. I created a UFO. I'm like, look at that. You'll remember that. And she's like, well, I might. She didn't. So it was very frustrating. I felt like a ghost. And you start to question your own sanity. I knew it was real because I'd flown to a location out of body and then went there physically and was able to prove. I'm like, okay, not crazy. I knew I wasn't, but I just wanted proof. Finally, I'm like, well, I had met Dolly, and we were talking and doing all kinds of interviews, and I know she has psychic abilities, mediumship, and so forth. And I'm like, well, she's in Georgia, I'm in California. I'm not sure or Florida. I'm not sure how this is going to work, because sometimes it does take a while. I was going down to San Diego, and I'm like, gosh, I only have 5 minutes left. I can feel my awareness slipping. And I commanded, and boom, you basically teleport. I went and saw my sister in Colorado, and I could see the mountains and everything. Zoom. It took about a minute. But with Dolly, I'm like, okay, I go to see Dolly. And boink, I was there, basically teleporting. And I landed in this kind of dark garage. I'm like, well, I don't see her. There's a man sitting in a lawn chair. I'm like, what's your name? He says, I'm Norman. Turned out he's a deceased one who's following Dolly around. But Dolly, I see her walk in, and Dolly will verify this. I see her walking through the door, and she's on the phone, and she whirls around, her hair goes whoosh, and she's looking right at me. I'm like, oh. And because she can see me, I mean, she's looking right in my eyes, and I don't think I said anything. I may have said, Dolly, and she says, I can't talk now. I'm being robbed. I'm like, oh my God, that's terrible. And of course, that strong emotion pulled me right back. And I woke up the next morning thinking, oh gosh, I hope she remembers this. And we spoke the next morning, and she's talking. I'm like, well, I'm not going to say anything, because obviously I'm crazy. If she was robbed, she would have told me right away. And if she saw me, she would have told me. She's like, oh, pretty much, we were 3 minutes in. She's like, I saw you last night. I'm like, you did? This is the middle of the night, mind you, because there's that time difference. So it would be like 3 a.m. for her.
Yeah.
I'm like, you did? She's like, yeah. I was on the phone. I'm like, that's what I saw. What did you say? She said, well, I I whirled around, I saw you. I couldn't believe it. You should see me out of body. I'm so buff. I have long hair. I'm young. It's the best thing ever. I mean, it's great. I cannot wait. I'm not going to rush things, but man, oh man, I used to be in such good shape as a young man, and I go right back to it.
Yeah.
And so at any rate, I don't know if I was dressed or not. I sleep in my underwear, so maybe I was there full on. But at any rate, I'm like, what did you say? And she says, well, I was on the phone with a guy. I was counseling him, and I said, I can't talk now. I'm with Rob. I'm like, oh, okay. Thank God. But it's really cool because she came and she can tell you, she surprised the heck out of me by coming into my room, appearing as a full color apparition. I mean, she lit up my room in golden light. I woke up, I'm like, what is going on? And there she was standing next to my bed, grinning ear to ear. I laughed so hard.
Turnabout's fair play.
So I got my comeuppance for surprising her. I didn't warn her. I didn't think it would work.
So can you appear as whatever you want? Like, can you project a different person to when you're going, or do they always see you? I mean, like this idea that some experiencers will talk about when we come to your world, we take on a body. We don't need a body. We do it because we need it in you can do the same thing. So are you able to project your buff self to somebody? And
yeah, I can appear as a little child. I experimented with that, which was really cool and really surprising. Someone asked me, what are you wearing? Gosh, I don't know. I've never checked. So one day I'm like, okay, well, let's look at my clothes. I was wearing my button-down shirt and shoes and my work clothes. And I'm like, well, this is odd. I wonder what my body is like. So I stripped. I was curious. And yeah, you still have your wonderful body there. And then I became more curious because Robert Bruce said, well, if you stare at your body, stare at your hands, they'll disappear. You can turn into an orb. I'm like, I don't know if that's true because I've stared at my hands before and they're unblemished and young, and you're very young and muscular. You go to an age naturally about 23, 25. I'm like, I'll try it. And I stared at my hands and I'm staring at them and they disappeared and became stumps. I'm like, oh, this is odd.
wow.
And yep, boom, I became an orb. Once I was flying along in the field behind my house, I'm like, what the heck is that light on the ground? And I looked behind me, there's nothing. And I looked and I'm flying over the field. I'm like, I see a light. Looked around, nothing. Finally, I came in for a landing. It was me. It was this beautiful silver blue aura coming out of my body. I'm like, whoa, that really was so cool. I mean, it's just an adventure every single time. I can't recommend it enough.
So how would that apply? Like if Susie Hansen describes, she was this sort of reddish orb, and her son, when he had introduced the sun, he was blue, which are pretty high level spiritual colors. And if you look at life between lives and stuff like that. So how do you relate that to the intelligence? Like when you see an orb in your bedroom and it turns into an alien, is that the same sort of principle where they can project themselves as whatever they want? And
yeah, well, gosh, I'm still trying to figure things out. I do know many
well,
cases where that's happened, yeah. And people come as different orbs, and you can put on a costume if you want. I've never tried to appear as, anything other than who I am. But yeah, I know
Dolly tried that.
Dolly's been able to appear as an orb in front of
Yeah,
people.
when I remote view, I show up as a blue orb. And I learned that real young, and ET taught me that it's anybody who can remote view can be seen as an orb. And when they're flying over stuff or we're looking for things, we often will remote view out first and go down and look at what we need to see and then come back up. And they can remote view and OBE at will. So most all the orbs that you see, if they're all good people or whatever, are can show up in the form of an orb if their consciousness is capable of doing that. Yeah. if you OBE and you're in your house and somebody's awake, you might actually be possibly seen as an orb. It's just the energy of your consciousness.
There
Wow.
are people who appeared as apparitions. I mean, Robert Monroe was able to do it. Sylvan Muldoon.
Yeah.
There's a number of cases. Dolly's been able to come over to my house and wait for me to get out of body, and she's good at it. And look, she's like, let's go on an adventure. She took me to the Oort cloud. Honest to God, it was the most
The
amazing
what
thing.
cloud? What is that?
The
You know,
Oort
the
cloud,
Oort cloud, where all the meteorites,
Kuiper belt.
Oh, okay, okay.
comets,
Wow.
Yeah.
all the all the stuff surrounding our solar system. One of them wasn't. It was an. She's like, "Do you see that one?" And it was a smooth sphere. You know,
Wow.
like, oh, that is amazing, and it really caught my attention. I don't remember much else than that. But afterwards, she's like, "Did you remember that?" I'm like, "I sure did. What was that?" She's like, "Well, what do you think it was?" I'm like, "I don't know, but it was artificial." She's like, "Well, there's your answer." It was, ET. So, yeah, the
Wow.
stuff you can do out of body is endless.
Yeah, I think
That's
that to me, it's almost like a more important subject because it gets down to how does reality actually work? When you start to experience that, then you suddenly realize it's not the world you thought it was. Like our perceptual reality says like everything, the sun goes around the earth and the world's flat and everything's solid and stuff like that. And this is showing you, no, 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 it's not true at all. And I think it's critically important. What would you say to people like me and other people who probably say, oh, I've tried it and it's not working? Is meditation important? Is the quieting the mind, the relaxing? What major problem do people have when they try that they're sort of getting off on the wrong foot?
there's three main obstacles. One is fear. People are like, it's scary, it's scary. One is laziness. They're really not putting forth the effort. One is skepticism. I can't do it. Well, you can. It's as safe as sleeping, and it does take effort. The more effort you put forth, the more successful you'll be. Relaxation is the biggest obstacle, I think, for people, because it does take a good 20 minutes to fully relax your body. You can always relax more.
You also
So
have to be able to focus. In other words, you have to let go of everything around you. All the things that take your mind away from what you're doing, anything that'll distract you has to be gone. A lot of people try to use music and you shouldn't. It should be just you. And you do much better that way.
yeah, and at some point you got to stop thinking about your body. You got to turn inward, kind of. Dolly's been helping me a lot because she's been doing it from birth, and I really struggled to just do it the old-fashioned way. People, go to the Gateway program and use HemiSync. I tried it. I didn't like it. It felt like it was forcing it, and you can't force a flower to bloom. Really, you just got to water it.
So the expression "you got to go in to go out" is correct.
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. Because it's a mental experience. I mean, essentially, at some point, you're going to turn your attention back out when you slide out, but you want to relax to the point where you start to feel movement, perhaps, or heaviness, or lightness, or vertigo, or ideally vibrations, and you'll know it. There'll be no doubt in your mind when you reach the vibratory state, because it's like an electric shock. It's like water pouring through you. You might hear loud noises, snaps, clicks, roars, swearing. I've heard swearing a couple of times, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. Those are exit distractions. It's either your mind or even perhaps lower level spirits. Don't worry about it. It's fine. And you just slide out. There's all different kinds of methods you can roll out. A really good method is to just get fully relaxed physically, fully relaxed mentally, and then visualize yourself running. Anything involving movement works. Being on the bow of a ship, going up and down, an escalator, an elevator, holding balloons. Imagine a pole and climbing up a pole. I've used all these different methods they outline in books. One I read recently, like, imagine a big eraser and just erase your body. I'm like, this is not going to work. It did. I literally grabbed this imaginary eraser, erased my feet, and whoosh, I was out. Not too long ago, I lay down in bed. My eyes were awake. I was tired, but I was fully awake. I started to feel the vibrations. I'm like, oh my God, I am awake. Wait, hold on a second. And then it just overtook me, and I kept my eyes open. Usually it's a little scary in the beginning, certainly. Not anymore. I've done it enough. But I kept my eyes open, and I lifted right out with my eyes open. It was the coolest thing because the environment changes slightly. It becomes a little bit more glowy, a little bit more ethereal, much crisper. You know, if you have any vision defects, they're gone. In fact, if you're good at it, you can start to see what do you call it, 360 degrees. And that accelerates if you go into the higher dimensions. It's super high definition on the other side. The colors, oh my God, the beauty of the other side is, you cannot describe it. It's the best place ever. You will love it, guaranteed.
You've got this all in your book. What's your book called?
It's called Out of Body Exploring, A Beginner's Approach. There's a
Wow.
lot of books that kind of dive into the deep end. I
Yeah.
guided the reader from the very beginning all the way to pretty much high level experiences. But
Wow.
boy, meeting your deceased loved ones is so worth it. It's
That was one of the
so,
questions. That was one of the questions I wanted to ask you. Where's your mother? Like in terms of like time, space. Is there time and space? Or is it a simulated universe? Simulated universe? Is it
no,
made a
there's a objective reality out there. I mean, there are places you can go on the other side where you can create whatever you want, and you are in essentially a matrix type environment, which is not what's happening here, by the way. This
yeah, yeah.
this is my assessment. We don't live in a matrix. This environment exists without you. It's objective. There's laws of the universe. This is a real place. Because when people talk about the matrix, I'm like, you've got some interesting ideas there, and there's some of this going on the other side. Because yeah, you can create any reality you want, but there's what you would call a consensus reality where you're all sharing. You're in a realm, I guess. It's not a planet as we would think of it. But my mom, she went way the heck up there. There's different levels. She went so high up, I could barely get there. My dad didn't make it that far. There's lower realms which are very urban and not as pleasant. I have to tell you, there's hellish realms. I went and visited some of them, and I went real low down too, to where there's nasty people and basically demonic entities. I'm like, I'm not doing that anymore. It was not good.
Yeah.
But people who are lost in grief and
Yeah.
anger and depression, those sort of things.
But the question would be, do we create that in like the lower realms? It's not like there's a God that sticks you there. We sort of are we creating our reality like when we die? Are we creating what we're going to experience and what level we go on? Or
Yes, if you're unconscious when you die and you haven't exactly had your brains on straight here and you haven't met karma properly and you're just like totally clueless, you'll go down to the lower realms. And there's an attempt at that point. Others will try to help you eventually, but you have to wake up. And it takes some people a really long time. So it feels like it could be a type of hell, but nobody sends you there. You do send yourself
Yeah.
by being unconscious.
yeah,
Yeah.
you create your own hell for sure. It's really hard to get through to these guys. And if you start doing this, you will be sort of inducted into trying to cross over lost souls, because it's a real problem. If you have any belief or even the idea of life after death, and you're a good person, you don't have to worry. The vast majority of people go right up to what I would call the garden realms. I'm not really a religious guy, but it's heaven. It's very much like heaven. But there are lower realms for sure, where people
have you
aren't
done
quite
any of
sure.
these saving of people or trying to move these people to go to the light or go to higher realms? Have you tried to do that kind of stuff?
Many times I've gotten better at it because I read about it and I'm like, I want to try that. And we all have guides who will guide us through. I didn't have guides. I'm like, what the heck is going on? They're there. But I'm the kind of guy who's like, go away, I can do this. And so they wouldn't show themselves. And finally they did. And I've met quite a few of them, but generally I'm out there alone. And I gave the command, I want to rescue a lost soul. And I was taken to this little girl who had been murdered, and worse, really. Just a little blonde girl. She must have been 6 years old, buried under her house. And she was crying and crying and crying, and had been there a long time. And I couldn't get her attention. Finally, I did. I'm like, would you like to fly? Because that's usually my MO. I'm like, you can fly. Would you like to try this? Take my hand. She's like, no, I'm not doing it. Who are you? Stranger. I'm like, how about this? Would you like to see your mom? I could take you to see your mom. And she's like, really? Like, yeah, I can do this. And I took her hand and off we went. And generally, once you hit the heavenly realms, they're immediately snatched up and taken to their family. You can't really follow them. It's a very personal thing. So I've tried. I read about this. I'm like, well, you're probably not going to succeed, and I haven't. I'm not giving up. But yeah, I've done this many times. When COVID hit, I would kept going to this place where there's people in this like a hotel or a mall kind of. They're all sitting at tables and stuff, and just talking, and they're all dead, and they know it too. I mean, I was walking once. There's two experiences I'd like to share real quick.
Yeah. Sure.
When I'm walking in this place, I'm like, this is a lower realm. It's all urban. It's completely urban. You know, the higher realm right above that is beautiful gardens, you know, trees, flowers. It's beautiful. This is not quite there. And all these people were dead, and I'm going from person to person. Like, are you dead? Oh yeah. You know, how did you die? You know, this happened. And I came upon finally a little boy, because some won't talk to you. They're just angry. I saw this little boy, and he looked okay. I'm like, can I ask you a stupid question? Are you dead? He gave me this absolute look of insanity. Of course, we all are. I'm like, okay. I'm just checking. And I guess they get that question because there's newcomers, right? Finally, I see this table with the old ladies talking at it. I'm like, okay, you'd think they'd all turn young, but no, this is a lower realm, so you don't immediately regress to, because you don't know. If you don't know, this is why OBEs are so important. It gives you a leg up when you die, progressing spiritually. So I asked him, I'm like, can I ask you a stupid question? Like, sure. I'm like, are you dead? He said, yes, of course. Everyone here is dead. And stupid me says, well, I'm not. Every darn head turned and looked at me. Every head swiveled. And I'm like, oh, holy crap. I'm like, bye. And I flew out. They don't know how to fly at this point. You know, they're not quite getting it. But, you know, this other time I was in that similar area. There's lots of these kind of consensus environments. And this was in the middle of COVID, and I'm talking to people. I'm like, are you here because of COVID? Yes. I'm like, is it bad? I'm like, they're like, look, all these people. I'm like, oh my God, this is bad. And, you know, I get names sometimes. I'm always trying to verify. Have not really been able to track anyone, but I've gotten names. At any rate, I saw this black guy who looked like he was doing well. He had a little bit of an aura around him of light. And he was kind of just in a good mood. I'm like, this guy is receptive. So I walked up to him, I'm like, hey, how you doing? He's like, I'm doing all right. You know, I'm doing not bad. I'm like, okay, you know, why are you here? He's like, well, I don't know. I said, did you know that you can reach a higher realm? There's a heavenly realm. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I can take you there if you want. All you have to do is grab my hand. And he looked at me like, you know, you're a dude, I'm a dude. I'm not grabbing your hand. Like, listen, it's not like that. I just want to help you. There's a bright, beautiful realm where it's gorgeous. You will love it. This is all telepathic, basically. Sometimes it's very much talking, but this time he was picking up on me. He's like, okay. And so I grabbed his hand, which was, you know, he's a big guy. I'm like, okay, I hope it works. And off I went. And basically what I do is just intend to go there, and I fly straight up really fast. And I'm suddenly all the dark, you know, there's lots of shadows and darkness in these lower realms. And it started to brighten up, and then the beautiful colors started, and the sparkles. I'm like, okay, we're there. And I broke through. There's a veil between these worlds. It's hard to describe, but it's like going through a bubble or something, or a sheet, kind of. Or like water, surface tension. It's like breaking out into water or out of water. And we broke through, and boom, off he went on his merry way. I'm like, darn it, well, another one escaped, but
wow,
we brought him to the other side. It's so much fun, you guys. You got to try it. You can do it. There's a steep learning curve, but it's not hard to do. I wrote down a little 1-2 page guide, which I'll send to anyone if you email me, prestonufo@gmail.com, I'll send it to you. And if you follow those, because I've taught people how to do this, workshops, you can do it. If you meditate each night for an hour for a month or two, that's what I did. It worked for me.
Yeah, you got to go through the work. That's, I think, what most people sort of give up the first night. They figure they can't do it or whatever, and I think that would be a main problem.
People have done it the first night. They're like, "Oh my God, it
Yeah.
worked! I just tried it and it worked. I can't believe it."
Yeah, yeah,
I'm usually counseling one or two people. There's a guy who's got diabetes and he's pretty much blind, and he's diving in and doing it, and he can see. So he's so excited
yeah.
because
I've done so he can see in terms of like as well as anybody, like in terms of seeing stuff, because I've written about that with there's actually the study on near-death experience people that Ring did on people who've been blind from birth and have the near-death experience or the out-of-body experience where they can see, which is pretty significant scientific material that it gives you the idea it's not really your eyes. There's something more going on.
yeah, we have inner senses basically, which are superior to our physical senses. But I mean, he was born with sight. He can see, but he just lost
Yeah.
his vision about 3 years ago, 90% of it. But he's really digging going into these OBEs because he's like, I can see colors again. I'm seeing all this stuff. It's so cool. So happy for him.
That's significant. I'm glad you're writing this up in your second book, or what's in your second book in terms of.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about, I lost my brother recently, my
Yeah.
nephew, my other brother, my father. Uh, so I've met them. Every time someone passes on, it's so awesome. And I've been pulling, rescuing lost souls. There was a guy in my house. I can't believe it. Dolly told me, she's like, your house is haunted. I'm like, really? Well, that could explain why the light keeps going on. And because I'm like just writing it off, I must have forgot. It's my library. I go in there and I read books, but I always turn off the light. I don't like to waste electricity. But I walked in there and the light and the fan was on. I'm like, okay, who's here? Who's doing this? She's like, it's a guy. That's all I can tell you. And then another contactee, a friend, said, I think you have a couple of people in your house. So I decided I'm going to go out of body and figure this out. Because usually I'm like out of body and I'm off to the other side where the fun is. So I'm walking through I go out of body and basically feel the vibrations and boom, you go out. Actually, I don't even do that anymore. I just suddenly get to that point where I can do it. I'm just relaxed and I slide out.
Can you do it every night, like at will?
No, we all do it every night, but I do it. Well, currently, I'm down to once or twice a month. I'm so busy. I'm
But I mean,
tired.
if you wanted to do it, you can do it. It's not like
Oh yeah.
sometimes you can do it, sometimes you can't.
Well, I'm not quite there, but if I
Okay.
really want to, oh yeah, I could do it. Yeah, no, I just would have to lie there for 2 hours until I'm like, okay, I have to do this. When someone dies, that's when I start really getting, I'm like, I've got to see them.
Yeah.
But
Okay, a couple more quick questions because I'm sure people want to ask questions here. But I wanted to hear you mentioned a couple of things just quickly. Spirit guides. How many spirit guides do you have, and have you talked to them, and are they giving you instructions? Have they indicated that they're helping you along, or tell me about that?
I think we have all of us have spirit guides, and there's 1, 2, 5 that work really closely with you, often relatives, my mom, for example, or someone you don't know necessarily, but you do because you've had lifetimes with them. My first real encounter was when I actually saw my mom. I came out of body, walked into the living room, and there was this beautiful Black woman there. Like, who are you? Look at you. Oh my God. Do I know you? Because I didn't recognize her, but I did. She was familiar. And she just smiled, grabbed my shoulders, spun me around, and pushed me through the wall. And long story short, that was my first tour of the heavenly realms. I met my mom. She pushed me to meet my mom.
Wow.
And another time I'm like, I want to see an enlightened master. Because I was really trying hard. I've read about people who've met people who are super duper advanced, who left the earthly plane. I'm like, I got to do this. This sounds really cool. And I'm like, I want to meet an enlightened master. And this lady appeared in a flowery dress. She's like, okay, I'm going to take you. Just remember, keep your eyes open. I'm like, okay. She grabbed my arm and pulled me so hard. I closed my eyes briefly, but instantly opened them. And I'm already coming in on the other side into a field. And there's this master there sitting in a wooden chair, floating about an inch off the ground. He's very Obi-Wan Kenobi looking,
Yeah.
robe and a beard and just this radiating spiritual wisdom. And I'm like, I wanted to kneel, but I didn't. I tried to just maintain. And he had a message for me, and it was this riddle, like they'll give you cones, you know what I mean? A Japanese cone,
Yeah, yeah,
K-O-N.
yeah.
And so I've had that several times. Climb into your crown, stuff like this. But this guy said, when you do something, do it absolutely. He punctuated each word. I'm like, what the heck does that mean? What? And a tunnel opened, and down I went, the near-death tunnel. It sucked me right back into my body. But it turned out to be a really deep sentence, because I looked up the word absolutely as it's used in that context, and it means without attachment, completely, positively, with no expectation.
Wow, that's Bashar, right?
Yeah. So basically, if you can guide your life with no expectation and do everything positively, completely, I mean, I could write a chapter, I will, on just how I unpacked that sentence.
Wow. Do you find the crossovers with the messages that people contact these guys? Is everybody getting sort of the same sort of message about oneness and love and these kind of things? Do you find a uniform message that's coming across?
Oh yeah, it's true with OBEs, with channeling, near-death experiences, with ETs, Native American elders, and pretty much anywhere you look for true knowledge, yogis and stuff like that. They all agree that love is the answer, walking away from fear, positivity, developing your own awareness. Uh, yeah, so many contactees get these messages.
Yeah.
We are you, you are us, we are one, we share same heritage. You know, Betty Andreasson, Quasga, told her, love is the answer for humankind. I was tickled when I heard that, because that's a gray, talking to her.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah.
my last question is a quick one, and then we'll see if there's some questions. You mentioned Area 51 and the moon. So what the heck's at Area 51 and what's on the moon?
Well, Robert Monroe talked about taking people to the moon and going to the moon. I'm like, well, okay, that sounds interesting. Let's try that. It took me several attempts. One day I popped out and it was a full moon. I'm like, there it is. Let's do this. And I started flying towards it. I'm like, gosh, because I had learned I can stay awake about 15 minutes at that point. And I'm chugging along. I'm like, I need to go faster, because that's 5 minutes gone right now. Faster, faster, faster. And I commanded it. And then suddenly I was zooming towards it. And boy, what a feeling that is when the moon becomes huge. And then I landed on the, I want to swear, effing moon. I mean, that's how I'm like, my friends will never believe this. No one's ever going to believe this. But it was just starks, grays, and it was very, very desolate. And I'm flying around just looking for stuff, because I've heard there's stuff on the moon, artifacts. And so I'm looking, and I found it. There was this dome that was smooth. You would never have seen it in a million years if you flew right over it, because it
Yeah.
was the same stuff as the moon. But it was there, absolutely.
Wow.
And Area 51, I flew there. Because I read an article in Fate magazine where they asked respondents to remote view Area 51 or go out of body or give psychic impressions. And they got 20 responses, all women, by the way. Not one man responded, or they didn't print it. And they told all these things that we'd verified already from firsthand experiencers about genetic engineering and reverse engineering and stuff like this. So I gave the command, and off I went in this weird spiral, and I'm like, boom, and I landed on Groom Lake. I'm like, whoa, this is a lot bigger than I thought it would be. No one's gonna believe this. These hangars are separated by miles. I'm like, oh my gosh. And I saw people in fatigues walking around, and I was right next to this hangar. I'm like, well, I could go inside, but what if there's ETs in there? I started to get fearful, and that pulled me back. But I went back, and this time I had a guide, and I'm so glad I did, because I didn't like it. I was with a group of other people, and it's this huge underground base that's very dark, and the energy there was thick and heavy and bad. It was not good.
Wow.
And I was taken to a room and shown a person who was a victim of genetic engineering, basically had been, or a horrible genetic experiment, because he was not normal. He was limping, he had a very thin body, he was deformed, he was being used as essentially a slave, a servant, a worker. And it just broke my heart. I just about lost it. And I really had to keep it together, and they pulled me out. I don't want to go back. It was too heartbreaking, and the energy there was really heavy. Yeah, I was so upset. You know, I don't think our governments have our best interests in mind. And the folks there, I didn't like them.
Well, thanks for pointing that out. You're a very interesting guy. Let's open it up for questions here. I'm so glad we got you here tonight, and I'm sure there's people. Let's take a few minutes of questions and see what people want to hear.
Can we have his email again, please? Can we have his email again?
It's super easy to remember. It's my name, Preston, and the word UFO. PrestonUFO@gmail.com.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, you definitely got to try the astral projection, guys. It's safe as sleeping. I'm telling you, you're doing it already. It's all about remembering. So if you can just start with that.
It's all about remembering. Explain that.
Yeah, we're doing it each night, and most people remember snippets of it. If ever had a flying dream, that's probably a memory of it. If you've ever had a dream, where you met a deceased loved one, probably an OBE. Dreams are essentially hallucinations and projections, but if you can pierce past that, you're in the OBE state. Lucid dreams are essentially out-of-body experiences, but if you can start to remember 3, 4, 5 dreams a night, you're so close, and you'll probably start having precognition at that point, because dissociation is the doorway to psychic ability.
Wow. So I actually did get pretty close, because I at one point I was remembering dreams 6 or 7 a night. I'd take lots of water, so I'd have to get up in the middle of the night, and then I'd remember, but they were so weird. I just thought, I can't take this. These dreams are so, it's kind of like, I don't want to write this down anymore. It's like
80 or 90% of our dreams are fears and desires that we haven't fully worked through. Yeah. So if you can work through all of your fear, your lust. When I started having OBEs, I was overcome with anger, and I would get lividly angry. I'm not an angry person. Apparently I had some issues. But then I'd get overcome with hunger, and I would create feasts of food. And I have my favorites. I'd create a table, and it'd be piled with brownies and chicken nuggets, sour cream on onion potato chips, and Neapolitan ice cream and orange juice. I would gorge for an hour. And then of course lust was a big thing, and I dealt with that, and it was so much fun. Believe I'm not going to go into details, but you can imagine what you can have. But yeah, you get past that. If you can work through these issues, it'll make it easier for you.
How can you differentiate between an OBE and when you're having an actual ET alien experience, when you remember it, when you write it down?
Well, that's a kind of a trick question, because you can, this has happened to me. When you go OBE, you can meet ETs. I was flying along, and there was a gray, surprised the living daylights out of me. That was an OBE. You can generally tell, because when you're pulled on board a craft or having a face-to-face encounter with an ET, it follows a pretty set pattern for the most part. With an OBE, it's very wide open. Just about anything can happen, but generally speaking, you'll be taken to another dimension, the other side, and it's very beautiful. There's plants and trees and sky and rivers. You'll meet deceased loved ones.
And another question is, a lot of people talk about the silver cord, but when I used to do OBEs a lot in my teens and 20s, there wasn't any silver cord. I went all over the cosmos. I went to Lyra, Taurus, another universe. I went to other planets and come back again.
Yeah. Well, let me just complete. When you're having a UFO experience, generally you'll be in a round room of some kind, and you're talking to an ET and you can tell by the quality of their presence. It's not quite human looking, probably an ET, not necessarily though, but there is.
It's also the quality of gravity. In other words, when you're awake and alive every day, you know that you're in gravity. You can feel it. Objects are droppable and solid, and you can't jump up and down and then suddenly fly. And if it's very physical. An OB is not. You don't experience gravity OBE at all. You're completely free of it. You're out of space time. Time doesn't exist when you're OBE. So there's a definite difference. When you breathe, you can feel the air going, and when you're in your body, when you're OBE, you cannot. You don't know that. So that's the difference. One is very physical and gravity heavy, and the other one is experientially different. You're not, you feel solid, but you're not, and you can change yourself and mute yourself. When you're physical, you cannot, and anything that's interacting with you can either have some sort of control over you or you over it. See what I'm saying? It's definitely physical. I mean, all you have to do is pull your hair when you're physical, and that's physical. I just pulled my own hair. You can't do that OBE. You can feel your hair, it's there, but you can't pull it to the point that it's trying to come out the follicle.
If you pull your finger, it'll stress right out.
Yeah.
A weird experience.
Yeah.
But as far as silver cord, I never saw mine for years. And a lot of people I've talked to have not seen it, and some see it every time. And finally, I made a point of it. And I woke up once and there was this hose wrapped all around me. I'm like, oh, what's going on? I dived into it and ended up going inside my head. But it was the silver cord. Another time I saw it, it was attached to my stomach. I really examined it closely. It's made up of many, many, many fibers. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. But normally I don't see it, and a lot of people never do. You might not even see your body in bed. It's another weird thing, because I've gone to my bed. I'm like, well, I'm not even in there. What is going on? Because there's weird, if you pop out, your house might look a little different. You might see into the past a little bit. Like, I don't have that couch anymore, but it's there. Or you might see, like, I don't have that chair, and it shows up. You buy that chair. There's a weird out of time aspect sometimes.
Because it's a multi-dimensional transphase shift, or it's an offset, like a juxtaposition of two dimensions superimposed in the same space. When you change your vibrational rate, you're manifesting in the alternate dimension in the same space.
Yep, sounds like you've definitely done this before.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Preston, your book, The Out-of-Body Exploring Beginner's Approach, does that describe like all these methodologies, how to do out-of-body experiences, astral projection?
Does the last chapter, I do a whole Q&A and outline all the exercises. I've since refined it quite a bit. So I'm going to go more into it in the second book, because I've learned quite a bit more. But yeah, I absolutely outline how to do it. And in a nutshell, again, it's physical relaxation, mental relaxation, and then visualizations and affirmations. You visualize yourself. You visualize yourself, like I said, anything involving movement, but also affirmations like, I go out of body now. Tonight I will remember everything that happens to me. I am out of body right now. There's something you can do throughout the day, which is really important. And that's called reality testing. Like right now, you think you're awake, and you probably are, but 1/3 of your life, you're actually on the other side and you don't know it. So what you want to do is start testing reality, and take your finger and try to push it through the wall. Really seriously, and say, gosh, I cannot pierce it. Or your desk. And do that 5 times a day, more ideally. Or try flying, or try holding an object up like a pen and seeing if it floats. Doesn't. You're like, well, of course I know I'm awake. Why am I doing this? What will happen is you'll be at work one day and like, okay, I'm going to do this stupid exercise, and you're going to throw this pen up and it's going to float, and you are going to lose your mind when all the walls dissolve and you realize you're actually floating above your bed, or you're on the other side already.
Yeah, there are actually actual apps you can put on your phone that will go off every 20 minutes that remind you, and it's just like a one thing. It's like, okay, time to do it again, and it'll go off every 20 minutes for the whole day. So you're going back to this reality check thing.
Yeah.
But this is useful in case you're like a regular practitioner of this stuff, just to make sure that you don't get lost knowing which reality you're in, or whether you're doing out-of-body experience, or whether you're just living your regular life.
No,
Like, in other words, if someone doesn't do these out-of-body experience practices, is there still a value to doing this kind of checking, regularly?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Pretty
because
much just at first, until you realize, until you become comfortable in being able to do it. In other words, it's a thing.
Right.
Because reality, physical, third dimensional reality is very, very real. You have to be careful though, because you can become delusional even on the other side. Or you have to ask yourself once in a while, all illusion go away so that
Mhm.
you see what's really there, because you might be, off on a tangent going, oh, I like this, I like this, I like this.
Mhm.
And you're creating all this stuff and now you don't know what you're doing. Then you
Right.
say, all illusion go away.
And can I
Preston,
ask you,
right?
how is it beneficial? Like, how is physical fitness come into play here? Like, is it all just mental, or is it also beneficial to be physically fit, to not have any alcohol or caffeine? You
yeah,
know,
it's
Yeah,
beneficial, but it's not necessary
no,
because anyone can do this. There's no special qualifications. You don't have to go on any kind of diet. But yeah, no alcohol, no drugs will make it
no,
a
no
whole lot
toxic.
easier.
so psychedelics also
No,
not recommended.
no, they trap you in your own mind. Uh, every university in this country and halfway around the world has tested what psychedelics do to your brain. I'm an RN
Mhm.
and I know what I'm talking about here. Okay. Uh, it is, you climb into your brain when you're on psychedelics and you can't get out. It traps you inside your physical mind. Your consciousness is cut off from it, immediately cut off. Doing psychedelics is you're running your own play in your own physical mind and you're not going anywhere.
So if
And they
someone experiences something on DMT or some other
no,
thing,
no, they're in their
that
own
may be an
head.
experience, but it's
It
still
is a
different
it's a lose
from what,
your own mind.
Preston and Dolly
Yeah,
have discussed, like, as I
Internal,
said.
as near as I can tell.
yeah.
Mm,
There's a whole long tradition of that, and I haven't really dived deep into it, but I don't recommend it because you can have all the experiences you want
mm.
through out of body experiences. And there's no danger of getting lost or trapped out or possessed or anything like that. They're way overblown. I've scoured the literature looking for any quote, negative OBEs. And people have had, I mean, you can encounter scary entities. You dive back in,
Entities that are
not going to
scary on
get
this
lost
planet.
or anything.
I
But
want to
yeah,
give you all something to think about real quick, okay? I just want you to think about this when I say it. The governments know how your brain works, and they know that you have consciousness, and they know that you're psychic, innately psychic. You have the equipment to be psychic, and they have worked overtime for a long time to keep you not using your abilities. Otherwise, you'd know what they were doing, because psychic ability shows you everything. As a matter of fact, drug use is encouraged. Psychedelics are now encouraged. It's everywhere and everything. And they don't say anything bad about it anymore. And that's because they bloody heck know that you're going in and not coming out at all. Think about it.
Last question. I'm sorry. I know I'm asking a bunch, and exactly because you just mentioned the last part. So my working pet theory, and it's subject to change at any time. I've only been researching all this phenomena stuff for a few months already, only, right? So anyway, we do have psychic abilities, some more, some less, but it's something that's readily prevalent in the population in general. And it's not only in people. I mean, it's also in dogs and cats and animals. I mean, it's part of like life in a general sense, right?
yeah,
So it's not just something that developed only a few hundred years ago or even a few thousand years ago. I mean, this is something that goes back to like life, like millions of years.
Yes, genetically built in to your
So,
genome.
so,
Yes.
so, if is something that so my pet theory is that if psychic ability, all this telepathy, everything all combined, if it exists a little bit, it should exist a lot. It
Exactly.
shouldn't just exist a little bit, because if something that provides instantaneous communication between people and people, between people and things, through time, through space, it is such a powerful ability, so to say, that is such a also enabler of social groups, right? Like language, telephone, telegraph, right? It enables people to act like as societies, as groups, instead of just individuals. Well, guess what? Telepathy and psi and all this jazz is just like the internet and the telegraph times a million. So evolutionary wise, it should have developed into, I don't know, something like where we're all just like one big hive mind, but yet we're not. So the question is, and I've heard this mentioned in a few books here and there, is it possible that we're somehow purposely, whether by non-human intelligence or just by the physics of the earth or something, or by the sun, but something is actually dampening our telepathic and psi abilities.
Three things right off the bat. A, you were born into a world where fear is taught to you literally the minute you were born. Fear is the number one mind killer for psychic ability. The toxicity levels on this planet are at an all-time high. They're the highest they've ever been. That dampens your psychic ability. If you're on, stop it, because that hardens up your pineal gland. The number one gland in your body that works properly for this is your pineal gland. You're being poisoned, uh, driven crazy, negativity, all of it, and they've known it for a couple, at least centuries. This is a master treating a slave the way they want to treat their slaves.
But the
They don't
master being just like, the Illuminati of people,
people
or
who want
master being like
control.
non-human intelligence.
No, not non-human. It is all us. You live on a planet where there are people who want to control you at all costs. It is evil, and it has been this way for eons here, period. And they are very good at it. They don't use the lash anymore. They use toys. They use drugs. They use toxicity. They use anything at their command to make you do their bidding. You are literally doing their bidding.
Okay.
Yeah, and remember, ETs, as a rule, communicate telepathically. They're
Right.
levitating. They're doing all these things that we can do, but we're just we're being blocked from our forward
Oh
progress.
yeah. I mean, I hear what you're saying. I don't mean to, monopolize the conversation, but my pet theory, like I said, is this goes back before any kind of social government structures. If
Yeah, we're
we,
supposed to
even
be
50,000
telepathic.
years ago, as Cro-Magnons who barely developed language had the ability to be a hive mind,
Yeah.
we would have been, and no government agency could have stopped it. I'm wrong. I could be wrong. Listen, what do I know, right? But my pet theory, like I said, and I may be totally wrong, is there's probably something outside dampening it and keeping it just enough for us to kind of peek into it. Anyway, who knows? Maybe I'm wrong.
Well, here's what you can do. Develop your abilities and wake up. That's ET's number one
Sure.
message to humanity.
Yeah.
Wake up. Prove
That
them
I agree wholeheartedly.
There you go.
Okay, I guess we should maybe get the last question here. Is the obvious question that will always be asked. Can you go into the future and get the lottery number?
I had a girl came into work once. She dreamt the lottery number. She played it. She won like $10. I don't think so. I think that there's a moral code and ethical code, and the more you abide to that, the much better you will be at this. And if you're using it for nefarious purposes, your spirit guides are not going to work with you. You can see future events. That is absolutely a part of this. And I think actually going out of body is a good, real method to develop clairvoyance and precognition. Boy, when I did it, I started having dreams that came true. Not every time, but as often as not. And often it would be little things like did someone get a haircut, or someone's going to give me a gift and I know what it is, and this sort of thing. So you can absolutely peer into the future. And ultimately it starts to develop into a waking ability. And you can start really practicing your ability to predict things, or have clairvoyance and remote viewing and all of this stuff. It's all connected. So yeah, you can see the future. You can visit the past too, for that matter, and examine stuff. Can't change it, I don't think, but you can certainly take a look at it. But you can see future events for sure. I've never tried to win the lottery that way. I don't know how successful you would be, but I've never tried that.
Well, Preston, thank you so much for being our guest, and thank you to Dolly for chipping in. Explain the book that you wrote about Dolly, and then tell us where people can get your books and what the book you're working on right now.
Yeah, the book with Dolly is Symmetry, a True UFO Adventure. It's all about her lifelong experiences with ETs, how they taught her how to fly the craft, and all kinds of things. And we really only skimmed the surface, so We're just now doing interviews for the sequel to that. Still looking for a title. We're bouncing around some ideas. So that's what I'm working on right now. I just put out Not From Here, Volume 5, about outlying and more unusual types of UFO experiences and weird patterns. Humanoids and High Strangeness is a recent book. And I'm so excited about this next out-of-body book, where I'm going to dive deep into my experiences, because last one went up to 2001, really from 86 to 2001. So I've had like 23 years of stuff to share, and that's what I'm going to work on right now. So it's Dolly's next sequel book and this out-of-body book that I'm working on now.
Super exciting stuff. I encourage everybody to check out your material, because you're a very smart guy and you've got a lot of interesting stories to relate as to what actually may be going on here. Is there anything you want, Betty, or?
Where's the best place to get his books? Does he sell them directly so we can give him all the money?
Well, no, I don't get any more money. Publisher gets most of the money, actually, unfortunately.
That's why I want to give you all the money.
But I mean, if you want to email me, I can give you a signed copy, and I get a dollar or two more that way. But generally,
Okay.
you know, I'm not in this for the money, but through my website is one way. Online at, you know, Amazon or Barnes and Noble, bookstores near you, either way. But
And
yeah,
do you do in-person events?
Well, Dolly and I do a monthly podcast called The Light Gate each Monday evening, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and we do Q&As. I have my YouTube channel, and I definitely am absolutely open to chatting with people if they want to learn how to do out-of-body experiences. I work with people. I'm thinking of doing a workshop to do that, but haven't done
He's
that
going to
yet.
be in Nova Scotia in September at the big UFO thing up there. So in
All right.
September.
Yeah,
I think it's September
you should
20th.
promote that a little bit right here now. And I was just thinking, if we can talk him into coming up to Winnipeg, we'd certainly love to have him and set up a meet and greet, and he can do a lecture and have a weekend in Winnipeg, as long as he's got a passport, of course. You'd need that to come across, but we've done that before and had a really good turnout. We have some places that have orbs and stuff that are really, and Grant's been there. Grant's been where we've had the Orbville, and that would be kind of cool too. So it's an idea. Come and visit Winnipeg.
Yeah, come in the middle of the winter so you have something different than
Oh, yeah.
California weather.
That sounds like fun. I'm from Chicago originally, so I know what cold is.
Yeah. Beautiful. So if there's nothing else, thank you very much. And maybe we can get you for another session when you've got your book done, the out-of-body experience, because I find that more fascinating. It seems to have more answers than the UFO thing in terms of what's actually going on.
Yeah, I've got a lot to share. Boy, if I want to tell you about all the times I've met my deceased loved ones. Oof, it's always
There you go.
different. So amazing.
Beautiful. Very inspiring. Thank you, Preston, and thank you to everybody for showing up and contributing. And next month, I don't know what the guest is. Betty, is there a guest next month? You know?
I don't know. We'll have to check with Mark, and he'll be back by then, and we can have him regularly in Winnipeg here.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, everybody, for joining, and have a good night, and meditate for an hour tonight, and get moving on the out-of-body experience so we can share some stories.
I hope you do.
Okay. Good night.
Yeah, make sure that that Grant, that you keep your recording too. Some of mine broke up a little bit. We'll have to get Laura to look at both of them and decide which one she likes the best.
Yeah, I'll send you a copy right away as soon as it's produced, and then you can do what you want with it and compare it or whatever you want to do.
Yeah, that's Laura. She's better at that. I'm terrible at it. I'm not very good.
Bye, guys.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.